Hi guys, welcome back to Dadlicious Eats, and today we're going to be making a delicious mozzarella and bacon pastry pinwheel snack. So this recipe only requires 4 ingredients. So we've got pre-made puff pastry, streaky bacon, fresh mozzarella and an egg for the wash. They take only 10 to 15 minutes to make, another 10 to 15 minutes in the oven, and you've got a delicious snack that can be taken out on picnics, put into school lunches, or just enjoyed while you've got friends over. Right, let's get to it. So onto the ingredients, and we're using pre-rolled puff pastry, so I prefer the sheets rather than the block, an egg for egg wash, 2 blocks or balls of fresh mozzarella, and 1 packet of bacon, which is about 200 grams or so. So here we're going to cut up the mozzarella into really small chunks. You don't necessarily have to use a knife, you could just break it up and pull it apart by hand. But it's completely up to you. But the key thing here is we're trying to get reasonably sort of consistent size of, pieces of mozzarella that we're essentially going to spread out on the pastry. I prefer using fresh mozzarella. I think the taste and the texture is far better than maybe, let's say, the pre-grated mozzarella. That just doesn't taste the same, it just doesn't have as much flavour. You could also do this with maybe a stronger cheese, so maybe something like a cheddar, potentially, or a Gouda cheese. That would work really well as well. If you're a subscriber, welcome back to the channel. If you're not a subscriber, why not subscribe to Dadlicious Eats? I've got tons of family friendly recipes, lots of tips and tricks and helpful hints for really planning out family meal times. So onto the bacon, and just like the cheese, we're going to cut that into really small pieces. And again, just like the cheese, we want it in these small pieces because we're basically going to sprinkle it all over the pastry. I'm always really keen to hear from you, get your thoughts on the recipe, get your thoughts on the presentation. If you've got any recipes of your own that you want to share with me or versions of this, let me know. Leave a comment below and I'll definitely get back to you. I think my favourite thing about this is simply because it's really easy and quick to make. The whole thing from start to finish, including popping it away in the freezer for 15 minutes or so, is probably about 35 to 40 minutes. It really is very simple to make these at the start of the week, and you can pop them into children's lunch boxes at any time. So once the bacon is all cut up, we're going to fry this off for about 5 to 6 minutes until the bacon is just done. You don't want it too overdone at this stage because it's going to be going in the oven in a second. Right, that bacon's looking perfectly ready now, so we're going to take that off the stove and we're going to start constructing the pastry. So take the pastry out of the packet. Like I said before, I tend to use the sheets because look, our work is pretty much 90% done there rather than having to shape a block into a rectangle. But what I do tend to do is I find that it's a little bit thick at this stage, so I give it a quick once over with a rolling pin just to thin it down maybe about 20% or so. Then we're going to take the bacon, pop that straight onto the pastry. I'm doing everything I can to not just eat all of this bacon right now. And just with your hands, just spread it out nicely so you've got a pretty even coverage, making sure you go right up to the edge, because what you don't want is a bit at either end that doesn't have much bacon or doesn't have much cheese in it, because there'll always be someone that complains, and that's usually me. Great, so that's good, and the same again with the cheese. If you're using fresh mozzarella like I am, just make sure you take it out of the fridge maybe 20-30 minutes in advance. What you don't want is a really wet mozzarella going onto this puff pastry, because as it's cooking, all that moisture will just soak into the pastry itself and you won't get a nice crispy pastry. Right, that's pretty much that for the cheese. So it's time to start rolling it up. So just take one of the long edges and start rolling it together. Try and keep it nice and compact. The puff pastry will expand as it cooks, hence the name puff, but you you want to try and keep it together, because else once you cut into it, you might find that some of the filling will fall out. So that's looking pretty good there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap that up. So just use the same paper that the pastry came in, roll it up, and we're going to pop it into the freezer now for probably 10 to 15 minutes. And we're going to do that. It's just going to firm up the pastry, because the pastry's been out of the fridge a little while, so it's getting a little bit soft and it's not so easy to cut at the moment. So pop it into the freezer for 10-15 minutes and take it out, and we'll be good to go. There we go. So we unroll that, and we can already feel that this log essentially is a lot firmer. You can see it as well, it's not quite as flexible. And take a nice sharp knife and start cutting about 1 to 1.5 centimeter wide pieces. But you can see how well this is cutting. If this hadn't been in the freezer, this would probably have turned into a bit of a pastry mush. So you're probably going to get somewhere in the region of 15 to 20 pieces here. At this stage, if you don't want to cook all of the pieces right now, what you could do is you could, once it's sliced, just pop it back into the freezer. It's good for a month or so. Leave it in there, and you could take out 3 or 4 pieces at a time if you like. However, we're going to cook all of them today, so pop them onto a baking sheet with greaseproof paper on it. I always use greaseproof paper. I think I've mentioned this before, but non-stick trays, I just don't trust them quite as much. So that's all on to the tray now. And one final thing we're going to do, and this is just for presentation purposes really, it's just a little bit of an egg wash. So just crack an egg into the bowl. You're probably only going to use about 1/4 to 1/3 of this egg, so keep the rest of this egg later, or scramble it up for one of the children if you want. But this will just give it a nice golden glaze in the oven. Without it, it will taste absolutely fine, but it will just be a bit paler and it won't have much shine to it. These are looking good to go in the oven. So into a preheated oven on about 180 degrees, 10-12 minutes, and they'll come out looking something like this. This smells absolutely great. The bacon, the mozzarella, absolutely delicious. You've got some leakage of the mozzarella, but not to worry, that's fine, because at this stage you can just mop it up with the rest of the pastries. And here you have some perfect looking mozzarella and bacon pinwheels. Perfect for lunches, perfect for snacks. Why not give it a try? So there you have it, these mozzarella and bacon pinwheels. Super easy to make, super delicious, sure to be a hit with the children or guests, whoever's going to be eating them. I'll be back with more great recipes soon. Until then, take care.